All right, so today we're doing a deep dive into New Mexico,
New Mexico, yeah?
specifically their native species,
Yeah.
and all the work that's being done there in conservation.
Sounds good.
We've got quite a variety here.
Yeah, it looks like an interesting mix.
Everything from the Mexican gray wolf to the Jemez Mountains salamander,
Wow. Yeah.
and some stuff in between, like the Gunnison's prairie dog, and the Coues white-tailed deer,
I'm not familiar with all of these.
and even some more common ones like the black-tailed jackrabbit.
Okay.
And, it's not just about the individual species. Our sources also talk about some of the bigger challenges for conservation in New Mexico as a whole.
Yeah, habitat loss and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Climate change, invasive species, all that.
Yeah.
But let's start with something really iconic.
Okay.
The Mexican gray wolf.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is an animal that's really captured people's imaginations.
Definitely.
But it's also critically endangered, like really, really endangered.
Yeah, I've heard it's one of the most endangered mammals in North America.
Right. So what happened? How did things get so bad for them?
Well, a lot of it goes back to, the 20th century.
Okay.
Back then, there was a lot of fear around wolves. People saw them as a threat to livestock.
I can see how that would happen.
So they were hunted, and I mean really targeted. Like there were government programs specifically to get rid of them.
Wow.
Yeah. And it worked, unfortunately, almost too well. So now there's a huge effort to bring them back. Captive breeding programs, reintroduction into the wild.
But it's not easy, right?
Not at all. There are still a lot of people, especially ranchers, who are, concerned about wolves coming back.
Yeah. I mean, it's their livelihood.
Exactly. So finding ways to, balance the needs of the wolves and the people who live and work in these areas, that's the real challenge.
It sounds like a really delicate balancing act.
It is.
We're from, predator on the land. Let's switch gears and go underwater.
Oh.
We've got the Rio Grande cutthroat trout,
Hmm.
and this is a fish that's only found in New Mexico.
Really?
Yeah, just in the cold, clear streams there. So what kind of threats does this fish face?
Well, it's interesting. They're facing a lot of the same threats as the wolf, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like habitat loss as humans develop more and more land. And then there's the issue of invasive species.
I hadn't thought about that with fish.
Yeah, another type of trout, the rainbow trout, has been introduced, and they compete with the native cutthroat.
Hmm.
And then, of course, there's climate change.
I bet that's affecting them too.
Absolutely. I mean, these trout need really specific water conditions to survive. And as temperatures rise and water flow changes, it's really putting them at risk.
Yeah, you don't often think about rising sea levels and stuff when you think of New Mexico. But climate change affects everything.
Yeah, it has far-reaching impacts.
Okay, so we've talked about wolves, we've talked about trout. Now let's move on to something, well, a little smaller.
Okay.
The Gunnison's prairie dog.
Oh.
I think a lot of people probably don't even realize how important these little guys are.
They're really fascinating, actually.
So tell us, what makes them so special?
Well, they're what's called a keystone species.
What does that mean?
It means that their presence has a huge impact on the entire ecosystem around them. Like, their burrows provide homes for all sorts of other animals.
Like what?
Oh, all kinds of things. Snakes, lizards, even burrowing owls. And their grazing, the way they eat the grass, actually helps maintain healthy grasslands.
Oh, interesting.
But they're facing a lot of pressure. Habitat loss is a big one as their grasslands are converted to farmland or urban areas.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem.
And then there's poisoning, too.
Poisoning.
Yeah, some people see them as pests and try to get rid of them with poison, which unfortunately can also harm other animals.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
So, yeah, public education is really important here, helping people understand that prairie dogs aren't just pests, they're a vital part of the ecosystem.
It's amazing how much one little creature can impact so much.
Right.
And speaking of creatures that benefit from prairie dogs, let's talk about the burrowing owl.
Oh, yeah, the owls that actually live in the prairie dog burrows.
Exactly. I mean, talk about resourceful.
It's a pretty smart strategy, right?
Yeah, it is.
But just like the prairie dogs, these owls are losing their habitat.
I bet urban sprawl and agriculture are affecting them too.
Definitely. And even though they're adaptable, they can only adapt so much.
Right.
So, yeah, they're facing challenges too.
It's a good reminder that habitat loss isn't just about, like, forests disappearing.
Right.
It's about all these different ecosystems getting squeezed.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit.
All right.
We're going to move south to a drier part of New Mexico.
Okay.
and talk about the Coues white-tailed deer.
Uh-huh.
Now, this is a deer that's adapted to the desert.
Interesting.
Smaller than other white-tailed deer, but perfectly suited for the harsh conditions.
Makes sense.
So how are they doing? Are they threatened?
Well, not as much as some of the other species we've talked about, but they still need careful management, especially when it comes to hunting regulations.
Yeah, you don't want to overhunt them.
Exactly. And of course, habitat preservation is crucial, making sure they have access to water sources and the vegetation they need.
It's interesting how each species has such unique needs.
Yeah, and that's why conservation efforts need to be tailored to each specific situation.
All right. Well, from the arid south, let's head up to the mountains.
Okay.
The Jemez Mountains, to be precise.
Right.
Home to the Jemez Mountains salamander.
Never heard of that one.
And you might not have, because it's incredibly rare.
Yep.
And get this, it doesn't even have lungs.
Wow, really?
Lives its entire life on land, breathing through its skin.
That's amazing.
But it makes it really vulnerable, especially to things like logging and development. And then, of course, climate change is a threat, too.
I bet.
Luckily, it's listed as endangered, so that provides some protection. That's good.
But it really shows how fragile some of these species are.
It does.
Okay, let's move on to a creature that's a bit more common.
Okay.
You've probably seen them hopping around.
Who is it?
The black-tailed jackrabbit.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
So they're not endangered, but they're still important, right?
Absolutely. They might not be as flashy as a wolf or a mountain lion, but they play a crucial role in the ecosystem.
So what kind of things threaten them?
Well, like a lot of other species, they need open space.
Mm-hmm.
And as development increases, their habitat gets fragmented.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem for them.
It is. And, they're a major food source for predators like coyotes and mountain lions. So if their numbers decline, it affects everything else.
It's all connected.
Exactly.
Okay, well, speaking of predators, let's finish up with a big one.
Sounds good.
The mountain lion.
All right.
Now, this is an animal that can evoke a lot of different feelings.
Yeah, fear, respect, even awe. Exactly. And they're essential for a healthy ecosystem.
Right, they're apex predators, keeping prey populations in check.
But coexisting with them can be a challenge.
Definitely. There can be conflicts with humans, especially when it comes to livestock or even pets.
Right.
So finding ways to manage that, to ensure the safety of both people and mountain lions, that's a big part of conservation.
Yeah. So it's clear that that conservation in New Mexico is, well, complicated.
It is.
What are some of the main approaches people are taking?
Well, one thing that really stands out is the collaboration. I mean, you've got government agencies, tribal organizations, conservation groups, even private landowners all working together.
That's impressive.
It is. And they're doing a lot of different things. Land acquisition, setting aside land for conservation, habitat restoration, trying to bring back damaged areas, and of course, a lot of research and monitoring, trying to understand these species and how to best protect them.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely.
But, one thing that keeps coming up is climate change. Yeah. How is that playing into all of this?
Climate change is a huge wild card. It's already affecting New Mexico, things like higher temperatures, changes in rainfall patterns, more extreme weather events.
And that affects the animals, too.
Absolutely. It can disrupt their habitats, their food sources, their migration patterns.
It's a lot to deal with.
It is. So a big part of conservation now is trying to figure out how to make ecosystems more resilient to climate change.
So that's quite a range of species we've talked about today.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
What's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that it's all connected. You can't just focus on one species in isolation. You have to think about the whole ecosystem, how everything interacts.
It's a web.
Exactly. And we're all part of that web, whether we realize it or not. So what happens in New Mexico, it matters, even if you don't live there.
Right. So as we wrap up our deep dive, let's leave our listeners with a thought. No matter where you live, you can make a difference. Learn about your local ecosystems, the plants and animals that live there, support conservation efforts in your area, and think about how even small changes in your own life can help protect the natural world. Because it's worth protecting.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye.